All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few things at the top, and then happy to take your questions. First, Secretary Austin welcomed Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Defense Kosiniak-Kamysz to the Pentagon today. The two leaders discussed the ongoing war in Ukraine and how Putin's war of choice continues to threaten our shared security. The Secretary commended Poland for its exceptional leadership on Ukraine, including providing vital logistics support and substantial security assistance. The Secretary also thanked the Deputy Prime Minister for supporting the nearly 10,000 American troops deployed in Poland that ensure NATO can deter and, if necessary, defend against aggression. Secretary Austin also spoke by phone with his Romanian counterpart, Minister of National Defense Tolver, earlier today. They discussed the strength of the U.S.-Romania bilateral defense relationship, our partnership within NATO, and Russia's war in Ukraine. The two leaders reaffirmed their unwavering commitment to bolstering the defense of NATO's eastern flank and reiterated their continued support for Ukraine to defend itself against Russian aggression. A full readout of both the Secretary's bilat and phone call will be posted later today on defense.gov. Speaking of Ukraine, tomorrow, Secretary Austin will host Ukrainian Minister of Defense Umerov here at the Pentagon. While I won't get ahead of that meeting, I will say that you can expect the Secretary to reaffirm the United States' unwavering support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. He will also receive a battlefield update, including on Kursk. And looking to next week, Secretary Austin will travel to Ramstein to host an in-person meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. This will be the 24th meeting of the UDCG since Secretary Austin formed the group in April 2022. The Secretary will be joined by Chairman Brown in Ramstein and will convene ministers of defense and senior military officials from nearly 50 nations to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine and the continued close coordination by the international community to provide Ukraine with the necessary means it needs to defend itself. Switching gears to the Middle East. Earlier this week, the Cape Trinity arrived from Cyprus to the port of Ashdod and has begun the process of unloading the remaining pallets of humanitarian aid. And that's approximately 6 million pounds of aid to be distributed within Gaza. The offloading process is expected to take between 4 to 6 days. Once complete, the Cape Trinity is slated to make a stop in Greece to unload a portion of its crew and then will depart for its home station. Switching gears again, the Department of Defense recently received a request for assistance from the Department of Homeland Security for additional military support capabilities to be afforded to major presidential and vice presidential candidates. The Secretary of Defense approved the request and directed the commander of U.S. Northern Command to plan and provide and execute increased support to the United States Secret Service at various locations across the United States during the 2024 election campaigns. The Department of Defense will provide protective support and that will continue through the election on November 5th, 2024, with anticipated continued support to the President-elect and Vice President-elect through the inauguration of January 20, 2025. And finally, yesterday, the 2024 Paralympic Games officially kicked off with opening ceremonies in Paris. This year, the department is proud to be cheering on 3 U.S. service member athletes who will be competing in these Paralympic Games. U.S. Army Sergeant First Class John Ross and U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Kevin Wynn will compete in the 50-meter mixed rifle event. And U.S. Army Sergeant First Class Elizabeth Marks will compete in 7 different swimming events. On behalf of the department, we're rooting for you. Go Team USA. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Tara.
All right, I've got 3 topics for you, but first on the extra support to Secret Service.
Sure.
What does that mean in practical terms? Are we going to see National Guardsmen patrolling sites? What's been asked for?
For more specifics on that, Tara, I would direct you to the National Guard and Secret Service. I don't have that level of specificity. So I think Secret Service could better speak to their request on that. So I direct you there.
But under what authorities are they operating?
I direct you to Secret Service on that.
Okay. Secondly, to get back to the 3rd anniversary of Abbey Gate and the Trump campaign's appearance at Arlington National Cemetery, U.S. federal law says that Army national cemeteries will not be used in partisan or political activities. Did the Trump campaign break the law by filming an ad there?
Look, for anything regarding any campaign ads, I would direct you to the campaign to speak to that, to the Trump campaign. What I can tell you is that, and I think the Army recently put out a statement earlier today that kind of went through what exactly happened in the incident. You can go on Arlington National Cemetery's website. It's very clear, the rules and regulations. What I'll say about the mission of those that work at Arlington National Cemetery, these are people who are dedicated to honoring our fallen heroes. And they maintain that hallowed ground. They work with the families in honoring those who have had their loved one lost. I'm just not going to go beyond what the Army has said, other than that, there was a report that was filed, but subsequently that person decided not to press charges. And so we're just going to, we stand by the Army statement that this matter is closed.
Why would the Army close the matter? If the person has decided not to press charges, the Army could still pursue it without that person pressing charges. But secondly, the fact of filming an ad on a national cemetery, if the Army doesn't further pursue this with either civil penalties or whatever can be done, what's to stop the next person from filming a political ad there?
Well, what I would say is the rules are very, very clear. They're also online and available on the Arlington National Cemetery website. That is really a decision that the Army has to make. That's not one that the department is making. That's for the Army to make. The Army considers this matter closed. The department stands behind the Army on that. Jen.
So, Sabrina, I'm trying to understand, in your understanding, what happened at the cemetery.
Yeah. And also, I'm sorry, you had also, just to go back to your earlier question on under the authorities, I direct you to the National Guard on that because it's going to vary on location. So I'm sorry, I should have been a little bit more specific. I would just refer you to the National Guard under what authorities those guardsmen are going to operate. In terms of your question on what exactly happened, I'd refer you to the Army to speak more to the actual incident itself. My understanding is that the families had invited, a few guests to attend a ceremony earlier this week, and there was some type of incident that happened between an employee at the ANC and a member that was traveling with another group's party. For more details on that, I'd refer you to the Army to speak to that.
Incident is a very sanitized word. What actually happened?
From my understanding,
was it verbal assault? Who did what?
From my understanding and from what the Army said is that an ANC employee who attempted to ensure adherence to the rules of the ANC was pushed aside. The employee acted with professionalism and decorum, but there was a bit of an incident that did happen.
So there are two different issues here. There's a potential assault charges that the person has decided not to bring, but there's also federal law that was broken, as Tara mentioned, filming a campaign ad or using campaign propaganda with the backdrop of these, of the cemetery. Can't the department refer that to the Justice Department for pursuit?
That's really, yes, that can happen, but that is a decision that the Army would have to make, and that's not, my understanding is that the Army is considering this matter closed. But in terms of, just to get to your broader question on political ads, that's not something that the department has a say over. That's something that gets adjudicated at the FEC level and between campaigns. So that, for anything that's used in an ad, I would refer you to the campaigns to speak to that.
But it is a federal law not to use what is essentially a base that is controlled by this department, and the defense secretary could overrule the Army. Why is he deciding not to overrule or get involved in this?
Look, what we want to focus on is the fact that the people that work at the Arlington National Cemetery every single day do so with dignity, work to preserve the memories of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, and ultimately work with the families who visit Arlington National Cemetery. And, there are nearly, I think it's like 3,000 public ceremonies that are conducted at Arlington National Cemetery every single year without incident. The rules and regulations are very, very clear. What happened earlier this week is very unfortunate. It's really the decision for the Army to make and to pursue any other path forward The department right now is not doing that, and the Army, we stand behind the Army in considering this matter closed.
Just last question, sorry, but on the National Guard Association appearance by former President Trump, there were National Guardsmen in uniform who stood up and cheered what was a political speech at the event, a campaign-style speech. Is that against the rules?
I believe that was I don't know enough about that event, honestly, so I just don't want to speak to it from here. I'm happy to look into that and come back to you.
I think that it is against the rules.
Warren.
Ukraine lost an F-16. Has Ukraine communicated that to the U.S.? Does the U.S. have any sense of whether it was downed by Russian fire or by something else? And has Ukraine asked the U.S. for any assistance in the investigation?
I've seen the reports. I'm not aware of any assistance or request for assistance from the Ukrainian side to us about this particular incident. But I'd refer you to the Ukrainians more to speak to any specifics on this pilot. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. A little bit of background to the question is, American troops are being attacked in Syria, Iraq, and from Yemen. Terrorists in those countries are also attacking Israel. So whose responsibility is it to stop the attacks and the attackers? And I have a follow-up.
That's a pretty broad question. But as you know, since October 7th, we have been postured to defend Israel. I'm not going to go through the all the things that we have done in terms of moving our forces to the region to de-escalate tensions. What I can tell you is that our forces, as you probably are aware, we have 2 carrier strike groups in the Central Command AOR. We also have assets in the Eastern Mediterranean. They're there to protect our forces. They're also there to help defend Israel should we need to defend Israel. And of course, we will always take care of our troops, whether they be in Iraq and Syria. And we've maintained the force protection to do that. And you had a follow-up?
Yeah, the follow-up is, since terrorist groups within Syria, Iraq, and Yemen are proxies of Iran, then why isn't the Pentagon stopping the source, which is Iran?
So I will tell you that we always reserve the right to respond at a time and place of our choosing. When we have been attacked, whether it be in Iraq or Syria, we have responded. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I will go to the phones and then happy to come back in the rooms. Idris, Reuters.
Hey, Sabrina, just, quite well, getting a statement through the different layers can be quite tricky, given that this was quite an extraordinary statement and quite rare for the Army to come out and say what it did say. Did they go through OSD? Did they go through the White House before putting the statement out? Or were you not aware of it, and was the Secretary not aware of it before it was put out?
You want us to go through an approval process checklist of internal deliberations, Idris? I'm just not going to do that, but we are aware of the statement that the Army issued, and we support what the Army said. All right, next question, JJ Green, WTOP.
Thanks, Sabrina, for this. To the question about the F-16 that crashed in Ukraine, killing the pilot. Can you say how many F-16 U.S.-made F-16s are in Ukraine or are on their way or will be sent there? And what, if anything, can you say about that incident more than what you said to Oren?
Jay, unfortunately, this will not be very satisfactory to you, but I'm just not going to get into numbers of how many F-16s are in Ukraine. That's something for them to speak to. That opens up a lot of operational security issues as well. So I'm just not going to be able to speak to that. In terms of the incident and the pilot that, has been referenced and that Oren had asked about earlier, I'm just not going to be able to provide more. That's really something for Ukraine to speak to. We have been, as you know, training pilots here in the United States. I will say that, broadly speaking, combat aviation is incredibly complex, and we've been very proud to train some of the pilots here in the United States, and not just here, but our partners and allies through the UDCG are also training Ukrainian pilots on F-16s. And, every day that they fly those aircraft. These are brave men and women going up there to defend their skies and to defend their country. And so we're very proud to have been part of training some of those here in the United States. But I just don't have more to add on that particular incident. I'll take one more from the phone and then happy to come into the room. Sorry, I think Eric Schmidt, New York Times. Charlie.
Thank you, Sabrina. Going back to the F-16.
Sure.
American trained pilot, American equipped F-16s, including, I think, a new electronics warfare package, American advised, which is still going on. Are you telling we're not tracking? We don't have the reason for what happened when it has consequence for the United States?
I'm just telling you that I cannot confirm the incident. I'd refer you to the Ukrainians to speak to their own operations.
But we, as the United States, are tracking the F-16s that we've
Appreciate the question, but I'm just not going to get into any more specifics about the incident.
Changing gears, you
Sure.
would say. It seems the Houthis have been acting up again. Do we have a forced presence in the Red Sea?
Through Operation Prosperity Guardian, between the U.S. and our allies and partners, we always maintain a presence within the Red Sea. I can't speak to specific ships that are there right now, but we do have, through partners and allies, a presence there. Janie.
Thank you, Sabrina. Two questions. It is reported that North Korea registered 13 submarines with the International Maritime Organization. This can be seen as an intention to wage war overseas. What do you think of the background to this?
I'm not aware of that report, Janie, so I just don't have anything to offer on that one.
Can I?
Yeah, sure. You have a follow-up? Yeah.
North Korean Kim Jong-un declared support for Putin's war in Ukraine. And could this be seen having international military training in mind, such as with North Korea, Russia, or China?
That's really for North Korea to speak to. It's not a surprise that North Korea has pledged support to Russia. We've spoken about that pretty publicly. We've spoken about the fact that DPRK continues to provide capabilities to Russia that they're using on the battlefield in Ukraine. We can only really speak to what we're doing. And you know what we're doing, Janie, is through the UDCG. The Secretary convenes 50 countries and partners around the world to support Ukraine and its battle on what it needs on the battlefield. There's going to be another meeting next week. That's another opportunity for allies and partners to come together to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs on the battlefield. But I'm just not going to speak for the DPRK. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. There has been domestic criticism that U.S. is spending too much as compared to its allies to protect the interest of allies. Even Donald Trump said that it will insist NATO members to spend at least 3% of their GDP on defense. Do you think so? That is this because of the leading role of the U.S. that Ukraine is able to do such advances and able to resist such attack till now?
You're talking about countries increasing their defense spending?
Yes, Trump said that I will insist NATO members to increase from 2% to 3%. Even NATO members are not spending 2% of their GDP on defense, and U.S. is like spending major.
We actually have seen an increase of NATO members spending more when it comes to committing to meeting defense requirements. That's actually something that this administration has been leading on and urging allies, a part of the NATO alliance, to do just that. You've seen commitments come out of Vilnius. Last year, you saw the NATO summit here in Washington, D.C., where multiple NATO countries announced further commitments to supporting Ukraine. So, again, we're on the right track here. Countries are continuing to deepen their cooperation and knitting together their resources to support Ukraine. It's been incredible to watch, and that's something that you really did see come together at the Washington summit here over the summer.
Just to follow up, Turkey is also a NATO ally of the U.S. So Turkey has some kind of reservation, especially about the situation in Syria, some concerns in Syria. So is this administration able to address the concerns of Turkey?
We have a great partner in Turkey. I can't speak to their criticisms or concerns other than to tell you that we work with Turkey on a regular basis, including with what is happening in the Middle East. I'm just going to leave it at that. Joseph.
Thanks. The Secretary has routine conversations with his Israeli counterpart. Was he or anybody at the department notified ahead of the operations in the West Bank over the last 24 hours?
To my knowledge, we were not notified about operations in the West Bank. We are aware that, Israel or the IDF, we were not notified beforehand.
And then yesterday there was a meeting between Arab military attaches and counterparts here at the Pentagon. Can you say anything more? Was that just a routine meeting? Was it, obviously with the context of everything and the backdrop of everything going on in the region, an interesting time?
Yeah, my understanding is this was a working level meeting that happens routinely. I wouldn't read too much into the timing. It's just something that does happen.
General Ryder said that the ship that was attacked by the Houthis recently.
The So Union?
Yes, the So Union appeared to be leaking. The EU said yesterday, and then today they came out and said it's not leaking. So can you tell us anything about why the Pentagon assesses it to be leaking and the EU not?
So there is, so what I will tell you is the tanker is carrying 1 million barrels of crude oil. Those barrels remain intact right now. The vessel itself is leaking some oil from where it was hit. There is still a fire going on, or multiple fires still burning on the ship itself. Those fires have not been able to have been put out by anyone because the Houthis are threatening to attack, any type of salvage recovery mission right now. So those fires have the potential to spread, which has the potential to get to those oil barrels, which will then obviously leak potentially 1 million barrels of crude oil into the Red Sea, destroying major ecological systems and creating an environmental. I think catastrophe is the only word to use. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. Our State Department designated terrorist group Baloch Liberation Army attacked Pakistan's southwestern province on August 26th, killed almost 70 people, including security personnel. So this group is it has strong ties with Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and TTP, the band, another outfit that has strong ties with the Afghan Taliban. So it seems like the fault line that U.S. left in Kabul in a chaotic or dramatic withdrawal that are active now. So the question is, U.S. claimed many times it built the Pakistani forces capacity to counter these groups. So at this moment, do you have anything for Pakistan, any comments for Pakistan in this specific event?
We strongly condemn any terrorist attack like that, and of course, our thoughts are with those who lost their lives during that attack, but I don't have anything beyond that. I'm not aware of any U.S. involvement or assistance to Pakistan at this time, but if that changes, I can certainly let you know. Yeah.
Secondly, just one more. Chinese Armed Forces commander visited Pakistan and he awarded with a higher military award. So both sides discussed military engagement, specifically the defense productions. As I asked before from the last briefing, that both countries have shared technologies and they're also thinking to expand it. Like I asked regarding the JF-17 Thunder technologies here to Iraq. So the question is, this administration left many loopholes with its Arab allies. We have seen with the Saudi Arabia. You left space over there. China gained there. They got normalization with the Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now Pakistan is going closer with China. Anything on this? Any reservation or any public reservation or private reservations you have?
I'm not aware of that meeting, so I can't comment on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. With regard to this Iranian attack in the region that we've been expecting for more than a month now, and that hasn't happened. First of all, would you deem that as a success of the United States, both in terms of diplomacy and military posture in the region, that might have deterred it so far? And are you still expecting it is the threat as real as it was a couple of weeks ago? Are you still alert?
So a few things, as we've said, I don't have the prediction calendar, crystal ball to predict and to forecast an attack. What I can tell you is I think we certainly got into the headspace of Iran and how they're making their calculations. You have two carrier strike groups in the region. We have said both very publicly and privately that we are there to protect our forces and will, of course, always stand in the defense of Israel should we need to. Whether that's impacted Iran's calculation, I think it has affected their decision making. Will there be an attack? I can't predict the future. I can't answer that. We remain postured, though, to protect our forces, and of course, if we need to, come to the defense of Israel.
I can one more. Earlier this week, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff said that since we've seen the Hezbollah attack, now we can say that there's less of a chance of a regional war. Do you share that assessment that Iran could also conduct an attack on a similar level, not something that's going to spark a regional war? Do you think that hands are tied a little bit because of the U.S. military posture? Do you feel like that attack is going to be limited?
Again, I can't predict what an attack would look like. What I can tell you is I don't think anyone wants to see a regional war. We certainly don't, and that's why we've made the decisions, or the Secretary has made the decisions to move different carrier strike groups throughout the region since October 7th, to rotate different and to bolster our force posture and our force presence in the region. We announced like a month ago, we have another squadron of F-22s in the region. So, we're going to continue to take the steps that we need to send a message of deterrence, because that's ultimately what we're sending. And all the capabilities that we're sending, they are there to be defensive in nature. Beyond that, I can't predict what other actors will do, other than to say that we, the United States, do not want to see a broader regional war, and we've said that from the very beginning. Yes.
Thank you. My question is about China. Okay. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing yesterday, and they agreed to have a telephone call of theater commanders in the near future. Yep. So, can you give us a little bit more about the schedule of this phone call, and is Secretary himself planning to have a phone call with his counterparts in the near future?
So I don't have any calls to announce or preview today, but we certainly welcome any time that there are high-level mill-to-mill calls between the PRC and the United States. You saw the National Security Advisor say just that in some of his readouts from his meetings. But when we have more calls to announce, we will, but I just don't have more at this time. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Jahan Zebali from Airway News, Pakistan. There were a series of terrorist attacks in Pakistan, and you just spoke about it. How the U.S. can help Pakistan rooting out terrorism from that region?
Look, we always remain willing to work with any nation that wants to root out a terrorist organization. We have good, cooperation with the Pakistani government. But in terms of these attacks, I don't have anything for you other than that. We of course condemn them. And, should anything change in our cooperation with the Pakistani government, I'm happy to keep you updated on that, but I just don't have more to provide at this time.
The defense minister was here and had meetings in this building. And a few months ago, he made a public statement that today's India goes to the safe havens of individuals who challenge India's territorial integrity and kill them. And after that statement, we have seen a killing of Sikh activists in Canada. And there is an assassination attempt on a U.S. citizen, another Sikh activist in New York, Gurpan Singh Bandhu. So is there any discussion on that matter? Because India said they are still investigating that matter. There is one person arrested by the U.S. authorities, Nikhil Gupta. So any discussion on that?
I don't have anything for you on that specifically. There was a readout that we put out after the meeting. I'm just not going to get beyond that. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. Regarding to the West Bank operation for the IDF, the United Nations Secretary Guterres described this military operation as like a dangerous development, and he asked to stop this, and he said that's already explosive, the situation. So do you share with him his concerns, and especially when we see all the readout from the Secretary Austin when he called his Israeli counterpart, he'd always ask to de-escalate and don't take any steps that maybe make the escalation higher. So what do you say about that thing?
Well, that's something that I'll reiterate here is that we certainly don't want to see an escalation. We want to see tensions to de-escalate in the region. We are aware that the IDF is conducting operations in the West Bank, but again, we don't have an understanding of what that exactly is. We're trying to learn more about their operation. The United States supports Israel's right to defend itself against threats to its security. But as always, and as we will continue to say, it has to do so in a way that limits civilian casualties and limits damage to civilian infrastructure. And that's something that will always be imparted. And you've seen that message come through in the Secretary's readouts with his counterpart. Yeah, yes.
Thank you. I have a couple on Ukraine. Today, Ukrainian foreign minister said that the Patriot systems announced for Ukraine previously by the partners have not yet been delivered. Could you speak more to that? What causes a delay here?
A specific system by partners?
Those Patriot systems that were announced for Ukraine previously.
There are Patriot systems operating within Ukraine. I would defer to them.
Most recently during the
We have, I don't have anything to read out or announce on the Patriot system. We've committed to providing them to Ukraine. Look, we continue to work with them when it comes to providing security assistance. The Patriot is quite a big system that we are sourcing different materials and component pieces from other countries to help Ukraine. I'd let Ukraine speak to that more specifically, but what I can tell you is they are getting a regular supply and support of security assistance from the United States and other partners that are part of the UDCG. So I'm just going to leave it at that. You had other questions?
Expedite those deliveries given the recent massive attacks from Russia?
I think we've certainly expedited delivery of not just the Patriot, but other systems and capabilities to Ukraine, including reordering some orders by that were designated for other countries. We've prioritized Ukraine. So I'd actually push back on the fact that we haven't prioritized Ukraine as a country that needs it most. Noah.
I want to follow up on the CMC question. Was there any DoD involvement in that meeting, whether through preparation or actually during the call or the meeting itself?
On the CMC meeting?
Yeah, the vice chair.
That was an NSC-led meeting. That was, the National Security Advisor traveled to meet his counterparts. We, of course, engage at our level, but I'm not aware of any DoD participation.
Mm-hmm. And I know in the past there's been confusion about who the vice chair's counterpart is in the U.S., whether that's Secretary Austin or whether his counterpart is actually the Minister of National Defense there. Is this a sign that you think the Chinese are seeing the National Security Advisor as a more natural counterpart than the Secretary of Defense?
I think it's a side, Noah, that we are having broader and more frequent communications with the PRC, which is a good thing. We want to see that happen. The fact that the National Security Advisor, and again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the White House, but the fact that he was able to travel, engage with his counterpart, other officials, part of the government, that's a good thing that opens up communications lines here, allows us to maintain those mill-to-mill ties as well. Just going to leave it at that. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up back on the F-16.
Sure.
Ukraine has acknowledged the loss of the F-16, and former Rep. Adam Kinzinger has acknowledged that the pilot lost on Monday was one known as by his call sign as Moonfish. He was one of 2 Ukrainian pilots that were actually very vocal here in the U.S., pushing for fighter jets, going to training in Arizona. Is there any chance that this F-16 was brought down by friendly fire, by one of the Ukrainian Patriot missiles, for example?
So, again, I can't confirm I've seen the reporting. I just can't confirm it. I don't have that level of fidelity right now. So in terms of if this pilot was killed and it was brought down by friendly fire, that I just can't speak to. That would really be something for the Ukrainians to speak to. The United States has not been asked to participate in any type of investigation to look into this incident. So, our role in this is that we continue to train and equip the Ukrainian pilots that come here for training. But when it comes to this particular incident, and I understand the frustration, but I don't have anything more to offer on it.
But is there a follow-on with the F-16s that have been delivered? Is there any sort of ongoing relationship? Is the U.S. tracking the F-16s? Are you providing ongoing maintenance? Are they,
It's not just the United States. You have to remember that there's an air capability coalition that has been stood up that the U.S. is, of course, a part of. So it's not just the United States providing support. Absolutely, the U.S. military is working with the Ukrainians on what they need, whether it be maintenance or, and that's, telephonic or remote maintenance support and help. In terms of tracking the F-16s, I'm not going to get into that level of detail, but we are certainly working with the pilots and the Ukrainian military to make sure that they are able to fly and operate these F-16s in the best way possible, and making sure that they're doing so safely. And we're providing that support and continuing to train. Okay, thanks everyone. Leave it at that.